America first.
Donald Trump will be back in the White House with a powerful mandate after his decisive election victory.
We're going to help our country heal.
As U.S. president for a second term, he is set to make his mark on America's domestic landscape and foreign policy.
Great job you're doing in Indonesia. Great job.
Given his forceful personality, it will be his way or the highway.
Crooked Joe Biden.
Should the rest of the world be worried? Find out more in this episode of Talking Post with our top editors. Hello and thanks for joining us. The American people have spoken, or at least half of them have, and Donald Trump will be the next US president. While many are still talking about how or why he was able to beat Kamala Harris, the much more important question is what next? What next for China, for Asia, and for the world? So joining me in the studio now, I have two of our top editors. Chow Chung-yan, executive editor, scmp. He's our China expert. Zuraidah Ibrahim is our executive managing editor, and she is our Asia expert. She's also head honcho on Hong Kong affairs, and both of them are international experts in their own right, experts in international relations, which we'll try to dismantle what Trump's second term will mean. Chung-yan, let me start with you. Trump is back with a bang. Worst case, best case scenario for China, the most important relationship in the world, which is China and the US. What are you expecting, and what's realistic?
Okay. I think before this election, you probably have heard from a lot of experts say that when it comes to China, no matter who ended in the White House, it's going to be the same. Now, there are some truth in this, but then, of course, it's also going to be very different. Because one thing in Washington that both sides can agree on is that China is now, they perceive as an existential threat to the US. So no matter which party, when it comes to China, the general direction is more or less the same. It's hard to imagine that any president can single-handedly bring the relationship back to what it is 10 years ago. Having said that, I do think that Trump's approach and his strategy will be very different from the Democrats. So I think to China is hard to say which one is better. Is that each has its own unique features, let's call it. So for China, the so-called best case scenario is nobody in Beijing will hold the naive thinking that any president will restore the relations back to 10 years ago. But they hope that while US and China compete, they compete within negotiated premises, meaning that both sides agree on some principles that you don't touch. And then we can compete, ideally compete in an agreed rules and conditions in many fronts. My thinking is that I think this scenario, the chance for this scenario is not very high. It's actually quite low. The next scenario is that China and the US will compete, and then the US will use everything within its power trying to delay or knock back China's development. Now, the US advantage is three-front. The US still has the world's largest market. The US market is 3 times the consumer market is, in real dollar term, is about 3 times as big as China's. Now, if US can also absorb the European market within its economic zone, then its advantage over China is very obvious. So that is why Trump has been talking about tariff. The tariff is actually the tariff's end game is actually to use this market advantage as a weapon against China. The second advantage the US have is still the technology. During the Biden era, they already started this so-called small yard, high fence strategy. Basically, is to deny access for China to all this so-called high-end technology. Now, the gap between China and the US in some sensitive technology sector is still 5 to 10 years. I think that this technology containment will not only continue, but likely will expand. US will try to really restrict China's access to its not only the cutting edge technology, but any technology that infrastructure, technology framework that China needs to rely on the US. Now, the third part is also related to Hong Kong, is the capital market. US is the global currency. US dollar is the global currency, you like it or not. And in the foreseeable future, this will remain to be the case. So for US to compete with China, US probably will make advantage of this, trying to deny the capital access for Chinese companies, etc., so that the US company can retain its advantage. This is just on the economic front. Now, on the geopolitical tension front, I think the US will also try to, I personally think in this scenario, US will use the so-called salami slicing tactic to gradually undermine China's presence in this part of the world, particularly over the South China Sea and also the Taiwan Strait. So in this scenario, the different from the previous scenario is that there will be not so much emphasis put on the negotiated premises. The US will do its best, and they will judge Beijing's reaction, and then may be willing to negotiate accordingly. Or if the result is in their favor, they will just continue regardless Beijing's protests. I think this scenario, the chance is very high. Now, the worst case scenario is that for Beijing, is the US will seek not only to compete with China, but actually seek a regime change. Now, this has been what the Beijing repeatedly told the US that it cannot accept. Now, when we talk about the regime change, if you remember in Trump's last term, towards the end of it, when Pompeo started to take more initiative over the foreign policies, the talk is no longer just to compete with China, but how this Communist Party regime is evil and is going to collapse, and the US is doing whatever it can to make that happen. So the end game is not only for US to beat back China as a challenger or a competitor, but actually see the regime change in China. See China suffer a Soviet Union-style collapse. Now, this obviously is not going to be acceptable to Beijing. And this also included whether US will actively encourage the Taiwan to seek for independence. And if that happens, then use that as an opportunity to, some say, even start a hot war with China. So in this scenario, then it's no longer competition. It's US out and out to gun down China. And you can imagine the kind of reaction you will see from Beijing. But personally, I also rate this scenario as an unlikely case.
Okay, we'll get back to China in a minute. There's a lot to unpack and expand upon there. But Zuraidah, on the Asian front, so apart from the obvious impact of China-US tensions and any escalation there, what can Asian leaders expect? Because I know that they have been forming alliances, they've been doing their own bilateral relations with China. But now with Trump there, this belligerent, very aggressive person, he's got his fixed agenda. What can we expect Asian leaders to be hit with, or what will they have to navigate, basically?
Okay, I think my starting point is that Asia is not monolithic. It's made up of very many diverse countries with different degrees of closeness with the US or with China. But I think what is most predictable will be in the area of trade and tariffs, which I think Chung-yan mentioned earlier. As you know, Trump said that tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary. I think we can expect that to happen. He has promised 60% tariffs on all Chinese goods and as much as 20% tariffs on all other goods. And this makes countries that have a huge trade surplus with Washington particularly vulnerable. And in this regard, quite a number of Asian countries are vulnerable. For example, Vietnam. It has a huge trade surplus with Washington, I think it will be hit. Ironically, it was a great beneficiary of Trump 1.0. When Trump imposed tariffs on China, there was a lot of supply chain diversification and a lot of Chinese factories relocated to China. But now Vietnam will be faced with its own set of tariffs. I think that's going to have an impact on its export competitiveness. But I think one other impact that Southeast Asian countries especially have to brace themselves for will be the flood of Chinese goods that are going to come into the market, making Southeast Asian exports even more uncompetitive. Of course, consumers will benefit. All of us will be happier. But I think the exporters will be affected. But I think the US also needs to consider the impact of the imposition of tariffs on its own domestic economy. It will be very inflationary. The US dollar will strengthen. And as we know, inflation wasn't good for the Biden administration. But of course, you can do something to mitigate inflation with maybe productivity gains, AI, tech, or whatever new innovations you can think of. And as we know, overnight they announced that Elon Musk will be the head of government efficiency in the US. So maybe he will be able to do something to combat inflation. But I think most people are not optimistic about that. And more interestingly, I think in the last few days, we have actually seen Chinese companies making inquiries to relocate their factories, their operations into Southeast Asia. A lot of real estate developers and realtors have been telling us that they have received a lot of inquiries from Chinese companies, whether it's Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia. They want to relocate. They are getting prepared for the onslaught of a new set of tariffs. I think in the short term this will be good, but I think also we shouldn't underestimate the capabilities of Asian countries at being able to adapt. I think that's one area that we have to worry about, the impact of tariffs on the region and globally. I think what it will do, it will inject greater risk and volatility to the global economy. And greater risk and volatility, as we all know, will mean greater uncertainty, a lower tolerance for risk, and it'll mean slower growth for the global economy. There is that real possibility. I think the other area of concern will be on the security front. For the longest time, the US has pledged, some sort of security umbrella for the region. For countries that have military alliances like South Korea or Japan, I think they will need to be prepared to have these security assumptions being re-looked by a Trump White House. The cost of the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea, for example, is huge. There are about 30,000 troops in South Korea and tens of thousands still in Japan. All of that, I think, will come under renewed scrutiny. I think this is something that Asian governments have to be prepared for. There's also this other structure called the Quad. I think the Quad is going to go out of the window. Trump, with his isolationist tendencies, has never been a fan of multilateral institutions. All these multilateral institutions that have held the international order in place, I think, will be questioned, right? He has already appointed someone who's anti the UN to be the UN representative to the US. So you can imagine what sort of rocky relationship that will be. But I think we also should not underestimate the agility of Asian leaders. They have survived Trump 1.0. They profited from it. They engage in strategic hedging between China and the US. They rely on China for a lot of their economic investments as they do the US. And they need some sort of security protection from the US. Some of that might go away, but they're willing to bide their time. They know Asian countries are on the rise. They will play the game of strategic hedging. I just want to, sorry if I'm going on too long.
No,
Yeah.
This is most interesting.
I want to draw your attention to this very fascinating, very brief phone call that the Indonesian President Prabowo had with Trump. It was to me quite interesting that Mr. Prabowo addressed Trump as Sir,
Sir.
throughout the entire conversation.
Which he would like very much. I'm sure.
In which Trump lavished praise on Mr. Prabowo and said that, hey, your English is very good, it's so good. I think that did not go down well with Asian elites. And Prabowo was very seemingly deferential, right? Calling him sir, and then he said, oh, yeah, my English is good because I had American training.
Oh.
So, but I think the White House would be foolhardy to confuse seeming deference for obeisance. Please note that Prabowo's first visit upon his election in March was to China, and his first visit upon being sworn in last month was to China, was to meet President Xi. He's going to meet him in APEC, but no, that wasn't enough. He went to meet Xi in Beijing. They cut about $10 billion worth of deals. So this is a very good demonstration, to me at least, of the kind of hedging game that Asian leaders will continue to play.
All right, let's get back to China again, Chung-yan. So, unless you've been living in an echo chamber of the liberal media, it's not very surprising that Trump won the election. So surely China, being as pragmatic as it is, as realistic, they would have seen this coming, and they would be well prepared, and they would be firewalled. So as much as they can. Can you just give us an idea of, just a summary of what China's economic situation is right now, especially in context of the recent measures, the 6 trillion yuan package for hidden bad debt, to help them out. So that kind of stuff. How much of that is going to work for what is coming, the storm that is coming against China with Trump?
Right. I mean, it depends on where you get your news. If you read I don't want to name them, but some of the media.
We all know who they are. Yeah.
Then you probably will have the impression that the Chinese economy is going to collapse anytime soon. And if you are in the financial market, if you your job is to do with investment, then you will think China right now is hell. You look at the performance of the China stock market, you look at the property market. If you talk to middle class or rich people in Shanghai, in Shenzhen, in Beijing, if you look at the Michelin star restaurants there, then the conclusion inevitably will be that China's economy is in serious trouble. But that is not the full picture of the whole thing. Because for China, particularly when it comes to the top leadership, they realize they actually have been preparing this not just before the election. They have been preparing this for years. They realize that China right now, in Beijing's mind, when it comes to economy, stock market, property market is only one part of the equation. What they really want to see is to see that China, first of all, consolidate its leadership position in the global supply chain. It needs to build up its industrial capacity, particularly in the high-tech sector. It needs to achieve the technology and the independence or relative independence. And it needs to grow the Belt and Road country market because that's the future. Now, if you look at the economic data in detail, then you will say that China actually are making progress on all this front. So ever since the past few years, the Chinese investment has been slowly but steadily flowing from the property sector, the so-called traditional sector, into the manufacturing sector. And this trend is continuing. The China's industrial output is growing. So in this regard, then Beijing is hugely successful. So yes, the domestic, particularly when it comes to the middle class, to the high-end consumer, they will feel the pain. But the argument is that as long as the so-called 600 million grassroots people, as long as that part is secured, then politically and socially speaking, then China is in a very stable condition. Now, Xi, actually, the Trump's victory, in a sense, I would say, strengthened Xi's position as well, because Xi's argument to the party and to Chinese people is that we are at this very critical conjuncture. We are facing an opportunity and also challenge you may only see once in 100 and 200 years. The only way for China to ride out from this storm is that we need to remain very focused. Now, given the size of China and given the industrial development in China, if China can stay focused, if China can avoid any kind of large-scale internal turbulence or political disability, then it's only a matter of time. China will have setback here and there, but by and large, the trend is going to be in China's favor. So China can actually afford to wait, to play the patient game. And China will gradually build up its advanced manufacturing, will become more competitive when it comes to technology. The buy and roll countries, China is going to make a lot of investment to help them to build up the infrastructure. And that when this new infrastructure comes in place, this is going to be focused on the green energy, on the sectors that China actually are super competitive right now. And this will be the future. The US, if Trump going to deregulate the fossil industry to develop what he called the liquid gold, they can go ahead to do it. But the bad is that the future is with the green, not with the oil. So all this means that in short term, China will face a lot of pain and setback, and it's not going to be nice. But I think the policy is not looking at the next 2 or 3 years or even 4 years, but longer. And in the long run, I don't think China's policy, economic policy or strategy is going to change very much.
Now, of course, everyone wants to know if there's going to be war with Taiwan. And given Trump's belligerent talk, is there going to be something? Is there going to be an escalation?
I don't think so. I think when it comes to Taiwan, first of all, it's a very important that we understand Beijing. I don't think there are reports in U.S. say that Beijing wants to take Taiwan back.
No, Chung-yan, I think we are quite clear on Beijing has been very pragmatic, right? It's going to be disastrous, a Taiwan war, and right. Beijing is fully aware of that. The problem is the provocation. How much can you put China to its back against the wall before at some stage it says enough? I mean, we got to do something here.
Okay, that really depends on what do you decide what is provocation. If when it comes to arms sale, yes, U.S. is going to sell a lot of weapons to Taiwan, like it or not. The complaint I heard from Washington while I was there is that from both sides, they think that Taiwan made too little commitment to its own defense. So Taiwan is trying to persuade Washington that it deserves more attention than Ukraine, than Israel. But from the Washington's point of view is both Ukraine and Israel, they are spending much more their resources on their defense. So Taiwan, you are not doing much for yourself. So if you want to get help, then help yourself. So that is even from the Democrats. They want to see Taiwan raise its defense budget above 3% of GDP. Right now, Taiwan is 2.5. Trump wants Taiwan to raise it to 10%. There's no country in the world, if it is not in a war state, will do that, right? But even 5% is going to be very punishing for Taiwan. But the result is U.S. is going to sell a lot of retired weapons and unwanted stuff to Taiwan, and Taiwan will need to take it at a price that Trump name it. That's clear. China can protest, but I don't think Trump will hold back too much on that. So on that front, that's for sure. Now about sending some warship, sailing through Taiwan Strait, making some high-level visit, etc. Now the later part I'm not so sure, but maybe they can do it through the so-called semi-official channels, etc. Those kind of provocation we cannot rule out. But when it comes to whether Trump will egg on William Lai to change the constitution, to seek for more greater international presence, that China will see it as touching the red line, I don't think so. I don't think there's a political will, not only from the Trump side, but across the political spectrum in U.S. It's one thing that they want to hold China down. It's totally another thing to enter into an armed conflict with China over Taiwan. So I think that there is consensus that they need to balance this game. Now, if you, Kamala Harris now is the history, but during the election, Kamala Harris actually took an interview with the 60 Minutes. I was told by people close to the Democrats that every question is very clear, very carefully vetted and prepared. So there's one question about Taiwan. Then Kamala Harris' message is U.S. respect the one China policy. Now, if you go to ask Mr. Trump, I think he may not give you a straightforward answer. But when it comes to Taiwan, I don't really see. His one selling point is that he can prevent the Third World War. Now, in what case a Third World War will break out? We already have war in Russia. We already have war in Middle East. A Third World War will be the direct clash of the two superpowers. I don't see anyone in Washington has the appetite for that. And I also don't think they already prepared for that. So the short question to this is, I don't see that during his term in office, the risk of a hot war in Taiwan or even in this part of the world will be very high.
Chung-yan mentioned the Middle East. So Zuraidah, this is a topic that you're very familiar with, the war in the Middle East, right? 43,000 Palestinians are dead, many of them women and children. It has gone unchecked. The Biden administration has failed miserably to do anything about it. In fact, it has funded and it has enabled this war to continue. I get the distinct impression it doesn't even have any appetite to end that particular war. So, with Trump in charge now, Trump has projected himself as an anti-war president. I would like to qualify that with saying that I actually support his anti-war stance. I believe, and I would like to believe in his anti-war stance. I also am a realist, and I know that it's got nothing to do with the lives being lost. Trump is about the money being wasted on these wars. Whatever it takes, as long as the wars can end. But as far as the Middle East is concerned, Zuraidah, and especially the plight of the Palestinians, do you think Trump can make a difference? Can he bring it to an end? Can he control Netanyahu?
I don't know whether he can control Netanyahu. He can bring it to an end, but I think the bigger question is at what cost, right? I think we do need to look at the appointees that he is assigning to the Middle East. I think one big piece of news that came overnight was the appointment of Mike Huckabee, the former Arkansas governor, to be the US ambassador for Israel. I think this is really bad news for the Palestinians. Mike Huckabee has a long history of being entirely supportive of the Israeli settlers, not just Israel, but the settlers. I think we can expect...
They also have a Christian fundamentalist background which drives this.
Certainly. I think there is an alliance between the conservative churches as well as the Israeli cause. So I think we are in for a rougher ride. I think one other piece of information that we should take cognizance of is that Netanyahu had a phone call with Trump, and where they talk about the Iranian threat, and they talk about putting an end to the war, right? How exactly they're going to put an end to the war is an open question. But one of Trump's spokesperson, this person called Elizabeth Pipko, she spoke to an Israeli TV station where she said that it will end with a decisive victory for Israel. As to what that will mean, whether it's complete obliteration of Gaza, we don't know. But what we do know is that the facts on the ground are changing very adversely against the Palestinians. There are no more civilians in northern Gaza. They've been pushed out completely. They're moving further and further south. Access to water is severely limited. I think the situation is going to get worse. And on top of that, I think there is a lot of anxiety and speculation that the Israeli hawks will use the next few weeks before January 20th, when Trump enters the White House, to attack Iran, to target their nuclear facilities. If that happens, I think we're in for a bigger conflagration. And this is why I think just a couple of days ago, the Saudi Crown Prince, and you know Saudi Arabia is very fond of Trump, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman took it upon himself to, for the first time after more than a year of war, to declare that what Israel was doing in Palestine was, in Gaza, was genocide. And I think this makes the possibility of any sort of Saudi participating in the Abraham Accords a distant possibility. I don't think it's going to happen for the foreseeable future. The Arab leaders, the Gulf leaders, are very worried about war between Iran and Israel because they will lose the security umbrella that the US provides. And they are dealing with a very febrile Arab street. The public backlash will be tremendous. Jordan will be particularly vulnerable. UAE is going to be very vulnerable. So they know, that a Trump White House could mean bigger danger for them, even though they are more in favor of Trump. If not for the Gaza war, I think relations between them and Trump would be, as they say, keen but measured, and there are economic benefits to be gained from that. But all of that is not going to happen for now. So I think we're in for a worse time.
Okay. We live in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong news is very important for us. So what about poor old Hong Kong, Zuraidah, when it comes to China-US tensions? As you know, we are an international financial center. We are heavily exposed, and we are an easy target. We are the Achilles heel of China because we are so important to China as the gateway to the rest of the world in terms of a financial center, everything else. So China's enemies are acutely aware that this is the little weak spot, so let's go for it. So what can we expect now with Trump? I do remember him saying back in 2019 during the riots and everything else that he would impose such sanctions on Hong Kong that our stock market would collapse and Hong Kong will go to hell. And I'm happy to report that we're still alive and kicking. We haven't gone to hell yet. We've been through hellish conditions. But now, is he going to be back with a vengeance? It's 2.0.
As you know, Marco Rubio will be the next Secretary of State.
Yeah, he's a China hater and a Hong Kong basher, right?
He's a China hater, Iran hater, Xinjiang hater. He's pro quite a number of these activists.
Muslims only when it comes to China. Yeah, sure.
So he has been particularly strident about Hong Kong, and if you remember, he was on the side of the protesters during Occupy, and in 2019 he was the lead sponsor of the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act. That act has an expiry date. After 5 years, it's going to die, and this is why he, over the summer, I think, puts out a new bill to reauthorize that act. But I think we have reached every possibility that bill can do to Hong Kong, right? One is to impose sanctions on individuals. I don't know who else they want to sanction in Hong Kong. Or the other is to impose economic sanctions. Hong Kong is a free trading port. If they want to impose tariffs on our goods and services, then we'll suffer the same consequences as the rest of the world. Beyond that, they've already sanctioned the use of US technology, access to so-called US weapons, so now we can never get tear gas from the US. Just a little factoid for those who are interested. So I think that hardline stance is going to continue. Hong Kong will continue to be kicked around, but again, there are limits to what you can do with Hong Kong. That game is kind of over. Trump did mention very briefly that, would he help Jimmy Lai get out of the country? He said absolutely, 100%. So I think quite a number of Hong Kong politicians would like to see him try. They have been quite vocal in their response, but very measured that, that he must abide by the rule of law. The Hong Kong government's response, interestingly for me at least, has been very careful and very nuanced. Chief Executive John Lee was talking about the need to maintain a win-win relationship, and that trade can only benefit both sides. And he pointed to the fact that there are still about 1,200 American companies based in Hong Kong because they need the business here. There's a trade surplus. amounting to about 250 billion US dollars. That's a lot of money. It benefits the US. There's a price that they will pay. It might not seem big in the larger scheme of things, but Hong Kong is still relevant in that respect. So I think they're trying to appeal to wiser counsel to prevail. Whether that appeal will be heard, I think that remains to be seen.
The 1,200 companies in Hong Kong that you mentioned that have set up business here, their own surveys regularly show that they're fine with the business they're doing. The amount of concerns they have about national security and all these tropes that the US government keeps throwing at them. There's a lot of gaslighting of their own citizens by the US consulate. Their business people here are quite happy doing business. They're even investing in the Greater Bay Area, and their consulate keeps telling them, no, you're in danger. You know, bring a burner phone or that kind of nonsense.
No, but the thing is, I do think that the Hong Kong situation will get worse because based on the political sentiment in Washington, I think this Jimmy Lai case again is a very being very biasly perceived in Washington. But this is a consensus across the bipartisan parties. They all think that him as a freedom fighter, etc., etc. Now we all understand that the case will come to its conclusion very soon, and when that happens, of course, I don't think that Beijing or Hong Kong government will cut any deal with Trump. So, but when that happens, I think Trump will have to react. He's no matter what do you say about Trump, he is a political animal. He understands that he cannot stand against the wind, and the wind in Washington right now is they understand all that Hong Kong is still serving and business interests for the U.S. Business community. They still understand Hong Kong has its value to U.S., etc., etc. But right now the mood is that if they can punish Hong Kong, if they can demonstrate that ever since Beijing starts to become more hands-on on Hong Kong it become a failure case, that will go a long way to strengthen this narrative war against China. And you have a lot of support in the both party for that.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point that you've raised. But what sort of levers do they have left?
No, when you talk about the individual sanction, they can sanction the judges. They can sanction the people in the judiciary. They can use this. Of course, this in the end is only going to be a very symbolic thing, but it will add to the general narrative against Hong Kong. And some people talk about the travel warning, right? The travel warning is actually quite real, in the sense that for a lot of the Fortune 500 CEO or the senior management, some of them, if they want to visit Hong Kong, they will have to get the clearance from their own security people. The security people will tell them whether it's safe to visit certain city. Now you can tell your security people, say, I know Hong Kong. Hong Kong is super safe, much safer than in New York, which is also a fact. But the thing is, your company will tell you, no, the government issued a travel warning against Hong Kong. It listed that if you go there, you were at risk of being detained, etc., etc., and we cannot approve for you to go there. That actually happened to one of the Fortune 500 companies that I know. And a lot of the China has this target to attract 50,000 students from the U.S. going to China. But one of the biggest obstacle is actually the travel warning. Not that the parents really worried about the safety in Hong Kong or China, or they actually understand the situation on the ground. But the moment you have the travel warning, that means that when you go out to buy insurance, the insurance premium will go up. Now, to a lot of the American parents, the moment they see that the insurance premium will go up, they will say that we will not go. We will just pick somewhere else. So that kind of a small thing, when you add them up together, still have a negative impact on Hong Kong.
I'd like to make one last point, which is we did talk about the world is all concerned about chaos during Trump's rule, right? During his reign. And but allow me to quote a passage from this Bible that he's been selling to Americans, the Constitutional Bible. I wrote something down from there. It's an excerpt from there. Ready for it? Made in China. So this is a transactional president. At the end of the day, I believe that business will matter, money will matter, and hopefully that will make the world a better place, and he'll make the deals that will make the world a better place. And that brings us to the end of this program. Many thanks to both of you for helping us understand what a second term for Trump means for the world, China especially, and this part of the world that we live in. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.